Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am joined by the Lewis to my Clark, not the Lois and Clark, Mr. Brian E. Roach, Mr. World Traveler Explorer Extraordinaire, correct?
Absolutely, sure. I am a world traveler. I am an explorer, whatever you said.
You are very sophisticated. You are like the, who's the Dos Equis guys? The world's least interesting man, maybe. But
I don't know about that. But I don't think anybody's ever called me sophisticated either. So,
well, yeah, it's to each their own. The reason I bring up traveling and exploring is I hope everyone is enjoying Terry's trip around all over. Terry is quite I call her Terry Bradshaw Fletcher. Actually, I think her middle name's Angel, which we don't recognize at all in the back rooms of Steel City Underground. But Terry gets around.
She's Terry Bradshaw Fletcher.
I know. She hates that. Absolutely hates it. She can't stand Terry Bradshaw, more or less for his more recent actions that besmirch. I love that word, by the way. Besmirch the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. But, yeah, Terry, being the medical professional that she is, travels all over Tarnation, and she's got all kind of tips and tricks to share with us. And we are close to football, not real football, still football in shorts, but we'll have more to talk about maybe in a couple weeks, and then Terry will still be doing these, and we'll throw them in maybe as like a third or even a fourth show during the week, depending on how much we do have to talk about. But, you know, I wanted to give Terry a little bit of a plug. She plugged me. I have another show that I started up maybe a few weeks ago that has to deal with content marketing, like blogging, podcast, email, social media. If that sort of thing is your cup of tea, you could just search for my name. That'll work in iTunes, but it's also called Discontent, because if you're not happy with your content, then you're discontent. Clever, you know, play on words. But Terry also does her own little thing with her Codecast podcast. So if you're in the medical billing or healthcare type industries and you have anything that deals with billing, that's how she travels around. She does keynote speeches and stuff all over the place. So she has quite a bit of experience with telling you. I was telling Terry, don't do the directions, please. I mean, you could tell us where things are. So she's going to clean that up, hopefully, so she doesn't sound like. I think we need a video, like a Food Network thing, because she makes me hungry when she makes me, you know, she talks about all these places with TVs and blah, blah, blah. And I want to get your opinion on this, because I'm like, a video podcast would be kind of cool if we did some like recipes, or anybody shared some recipes. I'm thinking about some recipe type things, maybe even like a book or something. Oh yeah, don't want to forget about the book. Tina and I had the Steelers preview guide that's out. If you're a Kindle or iBooks or the Nook, I think that's still a thing with Barnes & Noble. The ebook scene, if you're looking for that Steelers preview, it's a 2018 guide. It's $3.99, and it's like 175 pages or something. We have bios on every player and all kinds of stats and stuff in there. Actually, a few reviews that were left on it too, so appreciate that for those of you who already picked it up. But back to the recipe and food thing. I'm getting long-winded here, but I needed to ask you, Brian, because we're always debating. You know, we were talking about toast. You and I just used the Steelers crock pot last night, actually, because it's a little bigger. It made some, and quite the fitting dish for a Pittsburgher. It was kielbasa and pierogies in the crock pot. Slow cooked, very good. It came to my mind. But I had to ask you about wings, because Terry kept talking about wings on Monday. Are you a wing guy?
I am a wing guy. I mean, I'll admit, I like drumstick wings as opposed to the little teeny tiny wings that make me work too hard to get any doggone meat off of them. But I'll take either kind, or boneless wings, as a matter of fact. But I am definitely a wings guy.
Bone in or the bone out? You know, I kind of like both. I prefer maybe the bone in. You know, I almost feel like I need a bib when I'm eating these things. I'm not really in the hot. You give me something buff. No buffalo. No buffalo. I like spicy. I'll do like a Cajun dry rub. I like chipotle, a good chipotle. I'll do like a spicy or garlic parmesan, teriyaki. But anything that goes. Now, I'm not a ranch guy. I'm not mild or plain. But if you give me buffalo or heart attack sauce or jalapeno or habanero or ghost pepper or whatever gimmick, how do peppers get hotter? How do they keep finding hotter peppers? It drives me crazy because I don't care about hot to begin with.
Well, that's where you're wrong. Wings are supposed to be hot. I love hot. We went to a chili fest, right? And I went specifically to get some hot sauces, and I got Mega Death sauce.
Is that related to the band Megadeth?
No, it's not. But it's like 6 billion Scoville scale or some ridiculous amount. I don't know if there's not to plug another show, but there's a show on YouTube called Hot Takes. Which is guys eating wings. It's a guy interviewing people while they're eating ridiculously hot wings. I love the thing. It's a tremendous show. I enjoy watching it.
Yeah, why not? We already plugged 2 other shows today. So.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a lot of fun. But they have all these, and I've ordered hot sauces from them. Now, what's funny is just the other day on my Facebook page, we had gone to, I think, a California burrito or someplace like that, and they had this whole wall of hot sauce, and I was enamored, even though we didn't stay and eat there. I wanted to just stay and try all the hot sauces, and I found one that is now my new favorite for truth in advertising. It's called Ass in the Tub.
Oh, I saw that. I saw that you posted that on social media. That was pretty neat.
Hot is where it's at, man. Hot is where it's at. The hotter, the better.
It had a very, like a hillbilly-ish looking guy sitting with his, you could tell his pants were pulled down, but his pants were in like one of those washing basins with the bubble bath, the hillbilly bubble bath going. But yeah, speaking of the go-to places to watch games, one of my spots, if you're ever in the Northeast Ohio area, specifically Youngstown metro area, there's a spot that's not very far from my home. It's called Steel City, which is very appropriate, and you could guess where I go and watch Steelers games. Good wings there. They actually make you fill out a form for their hottest one, and this is a new one because the guy, it was one of the cooks and the owner they were talking about. However they concocted this thing, you have to sign a waiver form in order to eat it, and I don't know if that's just like a line to try and get you to buy it, or if that's legitimate, like, hey, you know what, we had our legal team look over it. But regardless, I'm not going to find that out. Now, we still have 2 other things going on. Hold on with this. Hold up here with us, folks. We still have the helmet worthy. If you feel you're worthy of a helmet, we got some of those trickling in. We are doing another pool of those for July, and then another pool in August. So don't forget steelcityunderground.com/helmetworthy, and also steelcityunderground.com/schedule if you want a nice graphic Steelers schedule wallpaper for your Mac or PC. That's free. You could just go on and you could like right click and save right off of it. It really won't really fit on the phone, and that like really looks ugly too, like the icons over the text. So I personally made that. I did not make one for the phone because of the ugliness. So now that we've got the odds and ends out of the way, and it's almost a whole other show, we do have something related to football to speak about, and it is Who Day. And it just makes me want to vomit in my mouth, throw it up and vomit again, just saying that. But we took a pre-camp depth chart look at the who's that team? Oh, the Cleveland Browns. I forget they're a pro football team.
Some team in Cleveland.
Yeah, well, the other Ohio team we're going to catch today, well, barely Ohio. They're from northern Kentucky, as I call it, the Cincinnati Bengals. And we're going to do the same thing here and look up and down their depth chart based on last year's guys that were playing, around September, October-ish to what it projects to look like this year. And there's not like a whole lot of change with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, they have new coordinators, and somehow Marvin Lewis got to keep his job, maybe contingent on that. So some things may change up here. It looks like their biggest changes, though, are, let's dive into this, Brian. You ad nauseum had spoken at length and ad nauseum some more about their offensive line last year. Now, I don't know necessarily if these changes are for the better, but they absolutely had to do something. Now, their left guard, Clint Bowling, is returning. Their right tackle, Jake Fisher, is returning, but gone are last year's starters, the left tackle. Then there's the center, Russell Bodine, and Andre Smith, the right guard. I didn't mention the left tackle because I don't know how to pronounce his name, but in his place, they traded for a tackle from Buffalo, Cordy Glenn, who has a lot of starting experience in the NFL, and he's a mammoth, a guy who got a huge contract in 2016, but Buffalo was willing to ship that price tag out the door to the Bengals. They desperately needed something there. They drafted from Ohio State Billy Price, who was, consensus maybe top center in the draft? I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
He was their first-round pick this year, and then they have a gentleman stepping in that was a former college free agent, which we're familiar with that with the Steelers. There's 2 undrafted guys on our line, so I'm not going to knock that, but Trey Hopkins as their right guard. I'm just going to take this as all the way up and down here, the 5 guys that are here. I got to give an edge and say that Cordy Glenn and Billy Price are probably an upgrade from what they had last year. I just don't know how much of an upgrade, and we got to see now. Billy Price got hurt, some freak accident on the bench press or something during the combine. During the combine, and he's supposedly all taken care of with that and should be good. They don't have a whole lot of depth here, but as far as the starters, I say they have improved at least marginally right now.
Right. The thing is, you're talking about an offensive line that was one of the worst, if not the worst, in the league. Definitely a bottom-feeding offensive line. There was no place for them to go but up. That being said, Cordy Glenn is definitely an upgrade over Cedric, whatever his last name is.
Ogabuchi.
Something. Whatever. He plays for the Bengals. I don't care. Well, he used to play for the Bengals. I don't know where he plays now. Anyway, Cordy Glenn is definitely an upgrade there. But it's not – you're not talking about, a Pro Bowl level upgrade. You're talking about a guy who's better than a guy who stunk. So, you're right in saying a limited upgrade. Billy Price is I like Billy Price. You and I, being big fans of the Ohio State University, we know Billy Price. I liked Billy Price in the draft. There was some question about whether he really truly was the number 1 center or not. Some people like the Ragnarok guy from Arkansas. Some other people like one of the other guys who were all drafted before him. But that had more to do with him being injured, I think, than anything else. Price has some issues in pass protection, which is not good news for Mr. I'm going to throw it away on 4th down, Andy Dalton. But I still think he's probably an upgrade over Russell Bodine. How much, I'm almost ready to say it's a push just because he's going to be a rookie and he's going into his first season, and there's going to be a learning curve there. Trey Hopkins, the college free agent, I don't know. You're hoping. It's plug and play and hoping the guy's going to turn into something. We've done it. We've had success. I still think this is a line that resides somewhere in the bottom 4/5 of the league. They're not going to be great. It would be a surprise to me if they were great, but they might be better than they were the year before.
Yeah, I mean, they need that because, the Steelers led the league in sacks. It's not like Greg Williams is sitting back and resting on his laurels with the Cleveland Browns defense, and we all know that the Ravens, that's pretty much the only reason they were even where they were last year, mostly because of their defense, their front seven. And we're going to talk about we're going to do the same thing with the Ravens in an upcoming show, too, so we didn't forget about them. I'm not even sure why I picked the Bengals second, to be completely honest. I guess because I may feel that they're going to be maybe the top contenders within the division this year, because I don't see Cleveland making that big of a jump yet. Neither do I see the Ravens. I don't know, man. They always look like a mess. They somehow find a way to do it. John Harbaugh is a heck of a coach. But you know what? yeah, I'm with you with the offensive line. 41 sacks for their quarterbacks combined last year. Or I'm sorry, 40, I think, was the number I had. Andy Dalton, 39, and A.J. McCarron, who's no longer there, 1. And this is the strange thing because you talk about, and there's going to be a few other players mixed in and out here. It's almost like that weird Andy Dalton deal with the Buffalo fans buying Andy Dalton jerseys or whatever last year when they made it into the playoffs and donating to his foundation and whatnot. And there's players traded back and forth, multiple players between the Bills and the Bengals, whether it was the physical trade like Cordy Glenn or a free agency like where A.J. McCarron left and went there and is going to compete with. I'm always getting the two Joshes confused. Is it Rosen or Allen that's up there in Buffalo now? Now I can't even remember.
Allen.
Yeah, Allen. So they drafted. I forget which one they drafted, and then the other one is in Arizona. So. There's weird kind of a symbiosis between these two franchises. So let's talk about quarterbacks right now because it's still Andy Dalton. There's not a whole lot to say there. We trash the guy frequently. He didn't necessarily have the hottest year last year. 25 TDs, the 12 picks. His completion percentage dipped beneath 60% on the season, and overall he had an 86.6 quarterback rating. Their backups, A.J. McCarron was thought to be a guy that could just step in. A lot of people like him even more than Landry Jones. We'll get to see up in Buffalo if he competes or if he's a real deal or if he's just going to be, a backup if the rookie gets the job over him. But in their place, you have a mashup of just dreadful, if they have to play in Dalton's position, quarterbacks. There's Matt Barkley, who is presumed to be, he's one of these USC guys that floats around just on, that. He probably gets a job in the NFL. He's presumably the backup. Jeff Driscoll, who has been floating around too and is one of these, project developmental type guys, maybe holding the clipboard. He gets the fight with the 7th round draft pick, who I don't see making the team, Logan Woodside. Quarterbacks overall, I'm giving a thumbs down. This is just an awful proposition. I don't like Dalton as it is. Dalton a year later with pretty much the same team, maybe an upgraded line, could be a little better, but it is not going to be good if Dalton goes down for sure.
No, I can't imagine it is. Look, Andy Dalton has had a career that has been less than overwhelming, I think. He has had his moments where he's looked good. He's led the team to the playoffs. As we know, he's never won a playoff game, nor has Marvin Lewis, nor have the Bengals in forever, 20 million years, however long it's been.
80, in the 90s, early 90s.
Yeah, something absurd. And, I just don't see it. I think Dalton is on the downside of whatever kind of career he was going to have. He is probably better suited to be a backup at this point in his career than he is a starter, quite honestly. And yes, I'm basing a lot of that on I give up, I quit, I don't want to play anymore, I'm throwing the ball away on 4th down. You just don't do that if you have the mentality to be a starter and to be a winning quarterback. And he did. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't like their quarterback situation. I think that it's going to be tough. If Price struggles in the middle of the line, Dalton is going to get eaten up much worse than he did last season. I think they could give up more sacks while the two rookies on that line, or the college free agent, I don't know if he's a rookie or not, but and Price both, while they're getting their feet under them. But remember, it takes time for an offensive line to sync up and to become a living, breathing entity of its own. And that's not going to happen right away for these guys. So it's going to be a tough haul for them. And I'm not going to be impressed with where they are looking at that list of quarterbacks. And on top of that, their offensive coordinator, who's the guy who took over for the guy who got fired last year, has essentially torn up their playbook and started over, because even after they stunk up the first part of the season, not being able to score touchdowns and whatnot, they weren't that good in the second half of the season. So he's essentially ripped up their playbook and started from scratch. How is that helping Andy Dalton?
I don't know that it is. Just a little side note on Trey Hopkins. He was one of these undrafted guys, practice squad guy, that ascended into an actual starting role last season. He started 12 games as their right guard. So he took over for Andre Smith last year. So it's kind of a carryover. So I hate saying, because I do have it marked here as a change, but it isn't a major change. But then he also missed 4 games due to a knee injury. So he wasn't the projected starter. He came in, they were terrible, and now he's the guy again, which that doesn't bode well. That isn't a major upgrade. Now, they had a boatload of draft picks that could end up filling that role. But just to go back to Andy Dalton, who, as I'm looking at this, I didn't realize his birthday is October 29th, which is the day after mine. Boo. But he's going to be 31 this season on October 29th. So he's a year older. Over the last 4 years, he hasn't been exactly – he had one season where he threw for over 4,000 yards, but no other season had he done that, and that season was 2016. For some reason, he made the Pro Bowl, throwing 18 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. He had a 64.7 completion percentage. Year before that, 66.1, but only threw 3,200 yards, and he only threw almost 200 less attempts in 13 games, 25-7 ratio. But the year before that was traditional Andy Dalton, 19-17 touchdown to interceptions. But his completion percentage has been dipping, and he was sub 60 for the first time since his rookie year in 2011. He's never really lit the world on fire, so to speak. So when you talk about that with the offensive line, and you got to hope that Billy Price is gonna get it done, and that Cordy Glenn is the left tackle, it's still kind of patchwork compared to where they were during their streak of postseason appearances and winning an AFC North title or two in that mix. Who he's going to have to lean on? Well, they got rid of Jeremy Hill as the running back. He's going to go to New England and probably be like an all-pro and look like Eric Dickerson or something ridiculous, because that's just what happens. The guy will finally figure out how to not fumble the football, which was very beneficial to us, so to speak. The guy they drafted last year in the second round, took a shot on, was Joe Mixon, who could be very promising, who definitely was better than Hill anyways, but for some reason they were reluctant to use Mixon, and then Gio Bernard ended up going down. But Gio Bernard is somebody, he was drafted ahead of Le'Veon Bell. Let that sink in for a moment.
Yep.
I've never hated Gio Bernard, but he's always been more of kind of like the third down back mold. He's never been given the full workload. It's always been a committee of sorts, depending on who else they've had there. Their fullback is kind of like an H-back, plays tight end Ryan Hewitt. Remember, they let Rex Burkhead go. Isn't that funny that the Bengals backfield is now the New England Patriots backfield this year with Hill and Burkhead? But Hewitt actually isn't too bad, and he was an undrafted type guy. He gets the job done, but you got to lean on their running game here. I'm going to just I got to push on this. I don't know, maybe even just a slight marginal upgrade, because I like Mixon better than Jeremy Hill. What's your thoughts here, Bri?
Well, I'm going to stick with push. And the reason I'm going to stick with push is that I think Mixon got the majority of the carries as the year progressed last year. So, he is probably the same guy. And again, he's now going to be operating behind a newly patchworked offensive line with a rookie center and some inexperienced individuals there, and they have to meld. I'm hesitant to say that they're a better running team or have a better group of running backs than they did last season. Bernard's a year older, which is in running back years a year slower. He's got more tread on his tires and has had the same kind of devastating injuries that Bell has had early in his career. But if you twisted my arm and gave me a really hot, spicy wing to eat, so I would be happy, then I might give you an upgrade on it. But I'm going with push here.
I mean, now they drafted a guy in the 4th round, Mark Walton. And you know what? Now I'm looking at their draft class, and Billy Price is really the only guy that they addressed the line with. They took a 7th round guy, Rod Taylor. You never know how those are going to turn out. You could get Kelvin Beachum, or you could get some guy that I can't even name, like the Steelers have. And you could have that in any round, really. But I mean. It's not looking real promising because they didn't even sign anybody aside from the Cordy Glenn trade. They didn't bring in anyone either. I mean, they brought in a defensive tackle. They brought in Matt Barkley, and we'll get to the 2 guys on the defense. So like 3 free agents. They weren't real active with any of that. They let Bodine go. They let Andre Smith go. They had lost Eric Winston and Kevin Zeitler before that. Just real bizarre. And they had drafted guys prior. Remember, it was like maybe a year or 2 ago where they took like 2 offensive linemen back to back, and those picks haven't necessarily panned out for them in the long term either. I mean, there's Jake Fisher, but you know, how good is that? So when you're talking about that with the running game, then you got to deal with the tight ends here. And the reason Ryan Hewitt was playing tight end is because Tyler Eifert, he re-signed this year, and it's mostly an incentive-laden contract. The guy lit the world on fire about 2 years ago. I think I had him on my fantasy team because I recognized this was a guy where I was like, uh-oh. When he was drafted to the Bengals, uh-oh. Tight ends were killing the Steelers. They went and got him. And then they not only did that, but they doubled down 2 years later and took Tyler Kroft. And Tyler Kroft has been serviceable as a 3rd-round pick in 2015, but he gets banged up, and then they have to go with Hewitt. I thought there was going to be a double-headed monster there. They pretty much have the same group. If it's a healthy Eifert, it's an upgrade. If it's the same old, it's not going to be very pretty. And that's not going to help their run game at all. It's also not going to help the pass game. So let's look at the receivers unit as part of that too, so we can wrap the offense. It's A.J. Green, who is an all-pro deservedly. If he's on like another team, he could be a major superstar like Antonio Brown. Unfortunately, he has Andy Dalton. His numbers have not been great, but I mean, you get the ball anywhere near him, it's A.J. Green. Brandon LaFell still hanging around because the guy they drafted in the 1st round last year couldn't get on the field. That's John Ross. Fast guy. Neither you or I really liked him, and the Bengals did everybody a favor and took him high in the draft in 2017. Yeah. Then there's the former University of Pitt, Hail to Pitt, Tyler Boyd, who's been around for a couple years, and it was another one of those, wow, they may have gotten really good draft value grabbing him in the 2nd round. He is not a Juju Smith-Schuster. This is a push because if it's just the same group and it's just John Ross and he's what you and I thought he would be, it's the same group. It's a push. They're not an upgrade. And they got another guy, something core, that was okay and some spot duty too. Now, if Ross ends up playing and is anything better than average, I don't know. I don't know. Who do you put him in for? Brandon LaFell? You're still throwing the ball to A.J. Green. This is a push for me all the way around with the tight ends and receivers.
Yeah, I got one more bit of information about the offensive line. The Bengals did fire their offensive line.
Oh, yeah, they did.
They hired the Cowboys offensive line coach, Pollock, I think is his last name. And, you know, while that sounds like, ooh, that's a major upgrade because the Cowboys, they've had one of the best offensive lines in the league. But let's think about that for a minute. They've had stud draft picks in their offensive line, just monstrous guys. They've drafted their offensive line very well. But have they actually won with that group? In other words, has it been the dominating offensive line it should have been? Zeke did well with it, but did anybody else? I don't know.
DeMarco.
Yeah, DeMarco had a great year, 1 year or 2 years. And, I don't know. I just don't know. We'll see. It can't be worse considering how bad they've been.
Well, it was all first rounders with the Cowboys, and then Lyle Collins, who had that draft day scare, and everybody like scattered like cockroaches, and they got him as an undrafted free agent, which is like really unfair. That's a first round draft pick, maybe even top 10 if that news doesn't come out. So I mean, they've had guys like Tyron Smith, Travis Frederick. I know Zach Martin. He signed the huge deal, bigger than DeCastro deal. So, yeah, their money is right there. It's like the Great Wall of Dallas they're trying to rebuild there. I get what Jerry Jones is trying to do. That's not what they got in Cincinnati.
No, it is not. So it's I don't know that this is going to make any difference in the long run with them. Now, that being said, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the tight ends. When Tyler Eifert plays a full season, I'll believe it when it happens. The unfortunate truth is he's been extremely injury prone, and with a back issue, I'm not betting on him being able to be there for the entire season. And that, if that's the case, then that means they're not as good.
Very, very true. Very true. It's almost like the Gronk factor. Okay, how about defense? I wish Warren Sapp still had a job so he could start calling some of these guys longer in the tooth, because they're starting to get to that kind of where everybody was like, hey, this is a dominating defense, and now, you know, like when the Steelers started to get a little old and they had to do some patchwork. But we'll see what Cincinnati does here, because they've been drafting a lot of guys to kind of fill in the ranks here, and we'll go through some of it. So Carlos Dunlap, veteran, he's one of the defensive ends. The other is Nick Vigil, also pretty solid. They have a guy that rotates in with them named Carl Lawson, who we said was going to be only like a pass rush specialist, and he absolutely was last year, because he got, and I'm going to pull up the numbers here, he had like 7 or 8, I want to say, and he was only doing spot duty. So they also drafted Sam Hubbard, another one of our guys that we were looking at, who we were saying is kind of almost the same thing. So if they spell and do kind of, we've seen this rotation. The Philadelphia Eagles were very, very successful with it. The Patriots have deployed something similar. Andrew Billings was a guy that we were very high on, and then none of us knew that he had a knee injury, which caused him to miss his whole rookie season. They got him in the 4th round a couple of years ago, where we were saying the Steelers needed somebody to replace the big snack. Well, the Steelers barely use a nose tackle as it is now, so that doesn't look so bad, and they're going to use Billings in a 4-3, where I don't know. I guess he was kind of a 5 technique guy coming out of oh geez, I can't remember where he came out of now. It's on the tip of
Washington?
my tongue. No. And I wanted to say BYU, but that's not. I don't believe that's right either. I'm thinking of the old. Oh geez, it's escaped me. I'll have to come back to it. Geno Atkins is paired. Supposedly, this is the way it's looking heading into camp here. This is why it's a pre-camp look. But it looks like Billings with Atkins, and then I'm sorry, I said Nick Vigil. I didn't mean Nick Vigil. I jumped in the linebackers. I skipped over – they play a 4-3. I skipped over the other defensive end, Michael Johnson, who was one of those catch-and-return types like we did with William Gay. He left for a year, and then he came back, and he's still been more than serviceable. They have Jordan Willis as the guy behind him, and then Chris Baker, who came over from Tampa Bay as far as the depth. I can't say that Billings going in for Pat Sims. I don't know. If Billings ends up being more than what people thought as a draft, this is almost somewhat of a push. It may actually be an upgrade if Jordan Willis is a little bit better than he was with his rookie season. It's basically Johnson, Atkins, and Dunlap with Billings switching in for Sims. What do you think, Brian?
I kind of agree with that assessment. Look, it's going to depend on how the guys that they counted on from the standpoint of draft class last year to help prop up what is an aging line. I mean, Geno Atkins is great. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. But he's getting older. Michael Johnson has been solid. Carlos Dunlap has been solid. They have had a great defensive line unit, but they're getting older. Now you've got Billings, who's suspect, and he's suspect simply because he's coming off a knee injury. We don't know what you're going to get out of him at this point. Jordan Willis, he had some rep coming out of the draft, but we have to wait and see. Chris Baker doesn't doesn't excite me.
No, nor did Willis when we were
No.
discussing this back when, hey, you know, what kind of pass rushers could like the Steelers look at? And it's like, well, none of these guys were too exciting. Even Lawson, for that matter, we didn't think he was an every down type player. He's more of a pass rush specialist. By the way, 8.5 sacks, the official number. The guys that are, like I said, long in the tooth, Michael Johnson now age 30. So he's starting to get up there. We're going to talk about Vincent Ray in a second. He's 30. Dunlap's still 28. That's as of now. Some of these guys have birthdays coming up as we head into the season. Geno Atkins, 29. Who else am I looking for? Oh, that's going to be a fun one. Actually dumping Pat Sims because he was 32, going on 33. So, you know, it's just one of those things. You look at the linebackers. I talked about visual. He's pretty solid. Kevin Minner is out for Preston Brown, who comes over. He's another one of these Buffalo Bills who are now, you know, making the trip from Buffalo to Cincinnati. And then there's Vontaze Burfict, our favorite guy. And he's going to be missing a little bit of time due to a suspension. So you got to kind of pencil in either Vincent Ray, who has been one of his substitutes in recent years, or the draft pick in the third round a lot of people wanted for the Steelers was Malik Jefferson. And, you know, Burfict's good, but he can't stay on the field with his 3-game suspension. I don't know that necessarily Preston Brown is great as a replacement. I almost look at that as like a John Bostic type move for Ryan Shazier, though Minter is no Shazier. But I look at those guys as kind of like the same type of player. There's visual. There's Carl Lawson, Vincent Ray, and Malik Jefferson as the guys behind them. I think their depth this year may be better than last year. Preston Brown, but then they don't have Burfict for 3 games. It's tough. I don't know what to say about this. It's definitely not a downgrade. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I'm just going to stick with a push on this. You know, Burfict is Burfict. At some point, I expect him to just implode completely because he cannot. You know, it's as they say, he's a $1 million talent with a 10-cent head, and you know, he just can't get out of his own way to consistently play. And I think the league has taken notice. They've got their eye on him. If, you know, he's not going to get away with the kind of nonsense he was pulling a couple years back, you know, where he's cheap shotting people left and right in almost every game. You know, even after this suspension, I'll be amazed if he makes it through the year, not because of an injury, but simply because he's going to allow himself to do something dumb and get suspended again. So we'll see. We'll see. You know, I think Malik Jefferson, he has the athleticism to do some things. I just don't think he has the instincts, which is what I said when we talked about him coming up in the draft. The more I looked at him, the less I liked him. So, you know, maybe if he can learn, he can provide them something interesting there. But yeah, I don't think this is more than a push.
Yeah, I'm going to go in that same direction with the secondary. I mean, they still have Dre Kirkpatrick, or pretty much the guy who gets put on Le'Veon Bell's posters for getting stiff-armed. You want to talk about Dalton throwing a ball away, just try and have Dre Kirkpatrick tackle Le'Veon Bell and watch what happens. Usually he ends up with lying on his back in the grass. But Kirkpatrick's still a rangy corner, still somebody you got to respect. It's one of those vaunted first-round draft picks. Now they're starting to the first-round pedigree is starting to disappear here. Like, if they have an injury, which William Jackson has been banged up throughout his short career so far, but certainly talented. This is another one of these guys that everybody wanted for the Steelers, too. He's going to step in for Pac-Man Jones. I have to consider that an upgrade. Sean Williams, a former third-round draft pick, he's still kind of trucking along there, but I think that they keep trying to draft safeties and middle-round safeties or whatever and try and replace or upgrade him. George Iloka is still sturdy and still the starter there. So really the only guy that's coming in is William Jackson III. Their nickelback, Darquez Dennard, another first-round pick that a lot of people wanted for the Steelers too. He's kind of molded into being that slot corner type guy. I don't know that he's necessarily incredibly impressive for a former first-round pick, but he's there. Here's where it gets interesting is if they get anybody that's kind of banged up, there's like really no depth behind that. They took 2 late cornerbacks in the draft, like a day 2 and a day 3 type guy. And then, of course, one of the guys that we all had our eyes on was Jesse Bates as far as a safety. Now, that's where it could get interesting, whether or not Jesse Bates is a guy that might work in for Sean Williams. I don't see him taking over for George Iloka. Or will he be one of these money-type backers, dime backers, like we talk about with Terrell Edmonds ourselves? And then there's Josh Shaw, who's been hanging around, and he's had some starting experience as well. I don't know that the secondary is – well, I'll give the secondary improvement just for a healthy William Jackson playing in place of Adam Pac-Man Jones, plus the unlikelihood of William Jackson being penalized versus Pac-Man or getting in fights in the airport, which I think is the latest ordeal with Pac-Man. I think they're upgraded just marginally based on that, and having Jesse Bates at least coming off the bench for one of the two safeties.
Yeah, I like George Iloka. I liked him before. I was hoping, when his rookie deal was done and there was some questions of whether he was going to sign. I was hoping he would escape and that we could try and swoop in. I like Jesse Bates. We all liked Jesse Bates coming up in the draft. I think you bring up what I think is the best point is that unlike in the past where it felt like the Bengals were 17 deep at cornerback and they were all first-round picks, that's not the case anymore. The depth just is not really there. So if you start to lose any of these guys, and as you said, William Jackson has an injury history now at this point. If he gets hurt, if Dre Kirkpatrick gets hurt, then all of a sudden this becomes an extremely suspect defense because you may have a defensive line that is not as good as it has been in the past, or they may be fine. But, you now have issues where if any one of those components is a little off, it can expose the other areas. So if they have any kind of injury problem, they're in deep trouble because they simply don't have the depth to survive it. It's a team that I don't look at and think they're going to be better than next year as a whole.
Yeah, I'm totally with you because it was like, for years it was, okay, now they have Denard waiting in the wings. They have William Jackson waiting in the wings. And, it's just they don't have any of that anymore. And we're all prefacing this based on if somebody gets hurt. Well, it's true with like any team, but I think the Steelers are really set in the secondary as far as depth right now, whereas the Bengals have had to focus some of their picks on, and they've taken some luxury picks, you know what I mean? Like they took Mixon, even though, could they have gotten away with Bernard and maybe somebody that was the middle rounder they took this year? Quite possibly that could have happened. And then you look at Pac-Man Jones is out there. They had Terrence Newman for a while who was there. I never really cared for him, but he got the job done. It's going to be an interesting season for the Bengals. Where I think it really comes down to is when they fired Mike Nugent as their kicker, and they took a guy that got a game ball for us, who was sitting, eating SpaghettiOs maybe a few weeks before that without a job as their kicker. You look at the specialists here. They have Randy Bullock. He's the guy coming back. They brought in Jake Elliott last year to camp, put him on the practice squad, and then allowed the Philadelphia Eagles to go to a Super Bowl with that guy. That guy had a cannon for a leg, and Randy Bullock just looks like he struggles to make some of these kicks. And I don't know, like the guys that are in their upper management, I don't know what they're thinking. And then they brought back Kevin Huber as their punter. They must really like him as well. So the special teams is kind of in the same boat. They have all the same guys that are going to be returning kicks and punts and whatnot as well. So when you really look at this team, it's a matter of the trenches. But I don't know. I think the defense could be interesting. We'll see what they do with another year. The Bengals overall marginally improved. Does that get them back into the postseason picture? I don't believe so.
No, I agree with you. I don't know that I see them as an improved team. They were 7-9 last year.
Yeah.
I think that they could conceivably struggle to get to that. To be quite honest, I think, look, if everything goes as planned, and they have no major injury issues, I can see them maybe topping out at 9-7. And at 9-7, I don't think they're going to get in the playoffs. So we talked about this before. I think there's one playoff team that comes out of the North, and that's the Steelers. I don't think there's going to be a second team. But I also think that it really will only take that butterfly flapping its wings across the ocean to have the ripple effect on the Bengals and force them to be even worse. They're just a disaster waiting to happen, in my view.
Yeah, I think it's because of coaching too. Not necessarily. I mean, coaching, there is talent. This is where you got to look and say, hey, what has Mike Tomlin done with some of the guys they got? I know he's molded some of these guys into like all these Pro Bowl players. That doesn't just come from talent. It also comes from coaching. I mean, you just look at what's going on with A.J. Green. So last 2 years, I mean, this is where the Bengals were. They had a string of making the playoffs 5 years in a row. They were 9-7, 10-6, 11-5, where they won the division, 10-5, then 12-4 in 2015, and they won the division again, down to 6-9-1 and 7-9 for the last 2 seasons, and just finishing above the Cleveland Browns because the Cleveland Browns have only won 1 game in those 2 seasons combined. It's not looking too promising. Within the division, I could see them racking up the same amount of victories, but when you look at the rest of their schedule and they got to play some of the same teams like the NFC South, for example, they're not going to match up very well with like the New Orleans Saints or even the Atlanta Falcons for that matter. And I mean, the Buccaneers I don't look at too highly, period, although they'll probably beat us at home even without Jameis Winston on the field because that's just the week 3 curse. I'm just going to keep pounding my drum on that one. The Carolina Panthers even could present some challenges. So, I mean, right now on paper, it looks like a tough schedule for everyone in the AFC North with pretty much the same common opponents outside of 1 or 2 teams because of the way they finish. Obviously, the Steelers got to play the Patriots. I mean, that sucks, but at least you get them in Heinz Field. But that's where the Bengals are. That's where I'm leaving them. You know what, Matt Barkley, I don't know. They would be very fortunate if somebody drops a veteran quarterback that would be an upgrade from camp because that's just not looking very good. And I don't know. I don't know what else to think here. I mean, they got to play without Vontaze Burfict, one of their playmakers. It could be a rookie. It could be Vincent Ray. I don't know that Preston Brown is necessarily. He's just going to be kind of the average type of guy. If that secondary doesn't make the leap, it's really predicated on the secondary. And, you know, they have a new defensive coordinator. They have a new offensive coordinator. There's a lot of moving parts, and they got to get all of that together and hope to improve. I don't know that Marvin Lewis is the guy to get that done either. So that's pretty much my take on the Who Dey crowd. You could take it or leave it. I guarantee you my opinion of the Baltimore Ravens is going to be far more harsh. So as we were encouraging it, we were encouraging and kind of blowing up the Cleveland Browns, and it's relative. They can improve on being a 1-win and a 0-win team. The Bengals, on the other hand, I think they're just kind of in the same average below 500 territory as they have been the last few seasons.
Yeah, I want to say one other thing about their quarterback situation, and you're right in the sense that if somebody comes free, they definitely should consider making some improvement there because you're talking an absolute nightmare. If Andy Dalton isn't there, if he were to go down, that's just crazy. Now, we've talked about this kind of offline about these periodicals that come out that are print periodicals that try and summarize all the divisions and kind of say, who's going to be where and what, right? And I'm not going to mention the periodical because we've given enough plugs in this episode. But one of them made this statement: the Bengals clearly have faith in Andy Dalton because they waited until the 7th round to draft a quarterback. Baloney. That's not why they waited until the 7th round to draft a quarterback. They waited because the Steelers took their guy.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And the Steelers, speaking of, are quarterback rich. I like all 3 of the guys backing up Ben Roethlisberger. I would hate to see like a Dobbs or even a Landry Jones end up in Bengals prison stripes. So I'll leave it at that. Folks, we plugged more than enough things. Make sure you follow everything over on SteelCityUnderground.com and our Facebook and our Twitter and our Instagram and our Pinterest and YouTube, which is tremendous. If you're listening on YouTube, thank you. Hit subscribe. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. Until next time, be safe, be good, and we will catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.